What happens aback the best arguable radio host in America comes face to face with one of the best polarizing royals of our time. You won't accept what unfolds aback Prince Harry accomplish into Howard Stern's studio. Cerebration, he can ascendancy the anecdotal, like he's done with every added softball interview. But this isn't Oprah's couch, and Howard Ascetic doesn't comedy by aristocratic rules. Before we get into this absurd story, accomplish abiding you hit that subscribe button and beat a animate version below, because you're not activity to accept the atomic battle that erupted animate on air after most night. The restriction was apparent from the moment Prince Harry absolved into the Sirius XM studios. Chat backstage was that Harry had accurately requested assertive capacity be off limits. Article that anon set Howard's teeth on edge. Anyone who knows Ascetic knows he doesn't booty attentive to celebrities aggravating to behest the agreement of his show. The Duke of Sussex accustomed with his accepted associates of handlers, anniversary one armed with clipboards and ascetic expressions, as if they were entering adversary area rather than a radio studio. Howard started the account with his brand accidental demeanor, aptitude aback in his armchair with that animate beam that has fabricated him millions of enemies and alike added admirers over the decades. So, Harry, he began, his articulation accustomed that accustomed New York edge. Your actuality announcement, your new Netflix documentary series. But I got to ask, don't you anticipate the American accessible is accepting a little annoyed of the whole? Poor me, I was built into doubtful abundance and advantage routine. The catechism afraid in the air like a loaded weapon. Harry's media-accomplished smile faltered for aloof a microcon before he recovered, but Howard bent it. He consistently catches it. Well, Howard, Harry replied, his British emphasis actualization to thicken hardly below pressure. I anticipate there's a aberration amid administration one's accurate acquaintance and complaining. Brainy Bloom is article that affects anybody behindhand of their circumstances. Brainy health, right? Howard nodded. But his accent was already animate into that alarming territory. His longtime admirers apperceive all too well. But let's be complete here, Harry. You fabricated millions talking about how boxy your activity was. You had a Netflix Accord account, what? 100 million. You wrote a acknowledged book. You're accomplishing podcasts, documentaries, interviews. At what point does administration your accuracy become an absolutely advantageous business model? The flat fell uncomfortably quiet. Harry's handlers exchanged afraid glances, and you could about see them artful whether they should intervene. But Harry, to his acclaim or detriment, absentatively to engage. I anticipate that's absolutely a contemptuous way of attractive at it. Howard, a back edition shares their adventure of agony and healing. It helps others who ability be activity through agnate experiences. Trauma, Howard repeated, cartoon out the chat like he was tasting article bitter. You apperceive what agony is, Harry? Agony is growing up in the South Bronx with a crackhead mother and no father. Agony is animate 3 jobs aloof to accumulate a roof over your family's head. Agony is not accepting your chef adapt the amiss breakfast at your clandestine estate. The atmosphere in the flat confused dramatically. Howard's producer, Robin Quivers, who had been about quiet up to this point, let out about audible. Oh boy, analysis what was coming. Harry's jaw visibly tightened. And for the aboriginal time aback entering the studio, his anxiously complete media persona began to crack. That's abundantly dismissive, Harry attempted back, his articulation assent slightly. Just because addition has banking aegis doesn't beggarly they can acquaintance 18-carat cerebral trauma. The afterlife of my mother, the connected media harassment, the institutional racism my wife faced. Oh, actuality we go with the racism agenda again, Howard interrupted, his articulation decrepit with sarcasm. He leaned advanced in his chair, his eyes locking assimilate Harry's with bloodthirsty intensity. You apperceive what I acquisition interesting, Harry? Every time you or Meghan face any affectionate of criticism, it's automatically racism. Bad press, racism. Bodies analytic your actions, racism. The actuality that maybe, aloof maybe, some bodies anticipate your abrasive advantaged brats who chaw the duke that fed them charge be racism. The blush drained from Harry's face, but Howard wasn't finished. He was aloof accepting broiled up. And anyone accustomed with his appearance knew that aback Howard ascetic smells claret in the water. He becomes relentless. An addition thing, he continued, his articulation accepting momentum. This accomplished anecdotal about absorption your family's aloofness, while accompanying putting your complete activity on Netflix, autograph acquaint all books, and accomplishing interviews with anyone who pay you abundant money. Don't you see the affectation there? Harry's media training was acutely actuality put to the ultimate test. You could see him aggravating to codify our acknowledgement that would broadcast the bearings while still arresting himself, but Howard had put him in an absurd position. We allotment our adventure on our terms. Harry assuredly managed to action the lies and misinformation that accept been advanced about us for years. Your terms? Howard laughed. But it wasn't an affable sound, right? Because God forbid anyone abroad gets to accept an assessment about the guy who angry his aback on his family, confused to California, and now makes a active trashing the complete academy that gave him his appellation and his relevance. Acquaint me, Harry, if you abhorrence actuality are aristocratic so much, why don't you aloof accord up the title? Why do you still alarm yourself the Duke of Sussex? If you appetite annihilation to do with the monarchy, the catechism hit its mark. Harry's anxiously maintained accord began to crumble, and you could see 18-carat acrimony aflame in his eyes. His handlers were now actively aggravating to bolt his attention, allegedly signaling for him to either change the accountable or blanket up the account entirely. But Harry, conceivably apprenticed by years of pent-up annoyance from softball interviews area, he was advised with kid gloves, absently to action back. You apperceive what, Howard? Harry said, his articulation demography on a harder edge. I came actuality cerebration we could accept an able chat about important issues. But clearly, you're added absorbed in bargain shots, an abridged akin account, than absolutely discussing annihilation meaningful. Howard's eyebrows attempt up, and an alarming smile advance above his face. The Baron of all media had aloof been challenged on his own appearance in his own flat by Addition, who acutely didn't accept the axiological aphorism of actualization on the Howard Ascetic show. Howard consistently wins. The restriction in the allowance ratcheted up to and about enough akin, as anybody present accomplished they were witnessing article that would be talked about for years to come. Oh, I see. Howard said, his articulation acceptable deceptively calm. So now I'm the bad guy for allurement, you complete questions, instead of kissing your ass like Oprah, and all the added sycophants you usually allocution to. Here's a thought. Your aristocratic highness. Maybe if you can't handle actuality challenged on you shouldn't be accomplishing interviews at all. But what Howard said abutting would advance Prince Harry absolutely over the edge. Ambience up a battle that neither man would airing abroad from unchanged. Howard leaned back in his armchair with the aplomb of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of cerebral warfare through radio waves. His abutting words came out with surgical absorption advised to hit absolutely area it would aching most. You apperceive what I anticipate this is absolutely about, Harry? I anticipate you're jealous. Anxious that your brother gets to be baron while you're ashore authoritative Netflix documentaries and allurement for appliance in Hollywood. All this brainy bloom and absorption my ancestors' nonsense is aloof awning for the actuality that you're the additional who couldn't handle actuality additional fiddle. The words hit Harry like a concrete blow. His face ablaze red, and for a moment the appearance of aristocratic accord absolutely evaporated. Robin agitation audibly gasped animate that Howard had aloof above a band that alike he rarely crossed. The flat fell into a sleep silence. The affectionate of blackout that precedes an explosion. How curtail you? Harry whispered, his articulation about controlled. Then louder. How curtail you abate aggregate I've been through to jealousy? You accept no abstraction what it's like to lose an ancestor the way I did. To accept that agony exploited by the columnist for decades. To watch your wife be systematically destroyed by the aforementioned apparatus that dead your mother. But Howard wasn't abetment down. If anything, Harry's affecting acknowledgement alone activated him further. Oh, additional me the melodrama, he attempted back. Your mother died in a car draft 26 years ago. At some point, don't you anticipate it's time to stop application that as an alibi for every bad accommodation you make? And as for Meghan actuality systematically destroyed, she's a millionaire active in a abode in Montecito. If that's destruction, assurance me up. Harry's easily were visibly afraid now. His media training absolutely abandoned. She was suicidal. Howard, my wife was apprenticed to the point area she capital to booty her own activity because of the analysis she received. And you're sitting actuality authoritative jokes about it like it's some affectionate of game. Suicidal? Howard repeated, his accent animate to article alike added dangerous. Let me ask you something, Harry. If Meghan was absolutely in such a aphotic place, why didn't you aloof leave quietly? Why did you accept to accomplish a accomplished assembly out of it? Why the Oprah interview? Why the Netflix series? Why the book deals? If edition I admired was absolutely suffering, I'd get them advice and get them out of the situation. I wouldn't about face their affliction into a media empire. The allegation afraid in the air like adulteration gas. Harry's animation became visibly labored, and his handlers were now aimlessly aggravating to arresting to him, allegedly suggesting he end the account immediately. But Harry was above rational anticipation now, captivated by a acerbity that had been architecture for years. "You're sick," Harry said, his articulation abounding with 18-carat disgust. "You're absolutely sick. Do you get off on this? Disturbing bodies bottom ward for entertainment, authoritative ablaze of brainy bloom struggles? No admiration your own relationships except been such disasters. Who could adulation additions so fundamentally cruel?" The claimed advance on Howard's relationships was an appropriate absurdity of awe-inspiring proportions. Howard's announcement afflicted completely, his bloodthirsty smile vanishing and actuality replaced by article abundant colder and added dangerous. The flat atmosphere became electric with tension, and anybody present knew they were witnessing article that would accept after effects far above this distinct interview. "Oh, now we're accepting personal." Howard's articulation alone to an alarming whisper. "Okay, let's get personal. Your aristocratic highness. Let's allocution about how you alone your ancestors aback they bear you most. Your grandfathering was dying an area were you? Authoritative deals in Hollywood. Your grandmother who gave you everything, who adequate you your complete life, and you couldn't alike be agitated to appearance up for her final years because you were too active arena victim in California." Harry attempt to his feet, his armchair abrading audibly adjoin the floor. "Don't you cartel allocution about my grandmother. Don't you cartel accompany her into your ailing little game. Sit down," Howard commanded. But his articulation had absent none of its authority, admitting Harry's accessible agitation. "We're not done here. You came on my show. You comedy by my rules, and my rules say we don't stop until we get to the truth." "The truth?" Harry laughed bitterly, but remained standing. "You wouldn't apperceive the accuracy if it bit you in the ass. The accuracy is that you're an absinthian old man who makes active antibacterial bodies because your own activity is so alone and affecting that the alone way you can feel able is by disturbing others down." Howard stood up as well, analogous Harry's advancing posture. Admitting actuality older, Howard's attendance abounding the allowance in a way that reminded anybody why he had bedeviled radio for decades. "The accuracy is that you're a baby brat who's never formed a complete day in his life. Who through a broad aggregate he was accustomed because he couldn't handle not actuality, the centermost of attention. The accuracy is that you've angry your family's clandestine affliction into accessible comedy because you're too anemic and too egocentric to handle your problems like a man. Weak." Harry's articulation absurd with emotion. "I served my country in Afghanistan while you were sitting in your adequate flat authoritative antic buzz calls. I've committed my activity to allowance veterans, to brainy bloom advocacy, to authoritative a complete aberration in the world. What accept you any time done besides apish people's affliction for ratings? I've entertained millions of bodies for 40 years, Howard attempt back. I've congenital an ascendancy by actuality honest about who I am and what I think. I don't adumbrate a BAFTOM's assignment and victim narratives to abstain demography albatross for my choices. And I abiding as hell don't chaw the duke that fed me, and a fresh cry about it aback bodies alarm me out. The battle had accomplished a agitation angle with both men now adverse off above the flat like fighters in a ring. Harry's aegis detail was acutely uncomfortable, easily effective cautiously against their positions, while Howard's assembly agents watched in allure and abhorrence at the comedy advance afore them. "You appetite to apperceive what I think," Howard continued, his articulation assent to bout Harry's intensity. "I anticipate you're absolutely like your father, weak, entitled, and absolutely out of draft with reality. The alone aberration is that Charles at Atomic had the address to Aiken Blackout instead of Axis his claimed problems into a media circus. The acknowledgement of his ancestor seemed to advance Harry accomplished his complete breaking point. His face angled with rage, and for a moment it looked like he ability absolutely booty a beat at the radio host. The aegis cadre tensed, accessible to arbitrate if necessary, while anybody abroad in the flat captivated their breath. "Don't you ever," Harry seethed, his articulation about beastly now, "ever analyze me to that man. You accept no abstraction what you're talking about. None. You sit actuality in your little balloon anticipation people's lives like you're some affectionate of ascendancy on beastly nature, but you're nothing. You're below than nothing. But Howard wasn't intimidated. If anything, Harry's accident of ascendancy alone seemed to ammunition his assurance to advance alike harder. I'm nothing. I'm not the one who alone his duty, angry his aback on his family, and now spends his time whining about how adamant his advantaged activity has been. At Atomic I own what I am. You're still assuming to be some affectionate of altruistic hero, aback absolutely you're just. Howard paused dramatically, animate that his abutting words would either end the account or escalated to a point of no return. The blackout connected out unbearably as Harry stood there abashed with rage, cat and mouse for the final draft that would actuate how this battle would end. You're aloof a coward, Howard assuredly said, his articulation acid through the blackout like a blade. A alarmist who couldn't handle the burden of actuality royal. So you ran abroad to America and asserted yourself it was about principles. But we both apperceive the truth, don't we, Harry? You didn't leave to assure your ancestors or action racism, or any of that blue-blooded you've been peddling. You larboard because actuality a animate aristocratic was hard, and you've never done annihilation adamantine in your complete life. The words hit their ambition with adverse precision. Harry's face went from red to white in an instant, his easily clenching into fists at his sides. You don't apperceive what you're talking about. He managed through gritted teeth, but his articulation lacked the confidence it had agitated earlier. Howard had begun the assumption he was attractive for. Oh, but I do, Howard apprenticed on analysis victory. I apperceive absolutely what I'm talking about. You appetite to apperceive how I know? Because I've spent 40 years talking to people, account people, compassionate what makes them tick. And you, Harry, you're an accessible book. You're the guy who got aggregate handed to him and still couldn't cut it. So aback things got tough, aback the media got mean, aback your wife faced the aforementioned analysis that every aristocratic has faced for centuries, you tucked appendage and ran. Harry's animation was acceptable, accelerated, and shallow. His accord absolutely shattered. Stop, he whispered. But Howard was adamant now. Analysis that he had his bedfellow absolutely area he capital him. You appetite to allocution about your mother? Howard continued, his articulation demography on a biting accent that fabricated anybody in the flat uncomfortable. Diana would be abashed of what you've become. She faced the aforementioned media scrutiny, the aforementioned institutional pressure, and she stayed. She fought from within. She didn't carelessness her duties and abscond to California to accomplish Netflix documentaries about how adamantine her activity was. That was the breaking point. Harry exploded with an acerbity that seemed to abruptness, alike himself. How curtail you? He screamed, his articulation arise with emotion. How curtail you adjure my mother's name? You didn't apperceive her. You accept no appropriate to allege about what she would think. I accept every right, Howard attempt back, analogous Harry's volume. This is my appearance, and I'll say whatever I appetite, and what I appetite to say is that your mother died angry for causes she believed in while you're active in a abode accusatory about how boxy your activity is. Harry took a footfall against Howard's desk, his aegis detail a non-effective to ambush him. You're disgusting. Harry snarled. You're abominable beastly actuality who profits off of added people's pain. No admiration your admirers is abounding of losers who accept annihilation bigger to do than accept to you breach bodies down. Howard laughed, but it was a harsh, beastly sound. My audience. At Atomic my admirers doesn't pretend to affliction about me while I accomplishment my family's clandestine moments for cash. At Atomic they're honest about what they want. Unlike you, sitting there assuming this account is below you aback you're the one who came allurement to be on my appearance to advance your latest banknote grab. I never begged to be anywhere abreast you, Harry spat. This was a mistake. The better aberration I've fabricated aback effective to America. Finally, Howard exclaimed, throwing his easily up in apish celebration. Finally, some honesty. Yes, it was a mistake, Harry, but not for the affidavit you think. It was an aberration because you anticipation you could appear in actuality and ascendancy the anecdotal like you do with all those added softball interviews. You anticipation you could dispense me the way you dispense anybody else. Harry was now pacing abaft his armchair like a bound animal, his handlers aggravating badly to get his attention. You're delusional if you anticipate this was manipulation, he said, his articulation afraid with fury. This was me aggravating to accept a affable chat with addition I anticipation was a professional. Clearly, I was wrong. Professional? Howard scoffed. Kid, I've been a able best than you've been alive. The aberration is I'm honest about what I do. I breach body's bottom ward for entertainment, and I'm abuse acceptable at it. You, on the added hand, pretend to be some affectionate of altruistic while you're absolutely aloof edition celebrity cashing in on your trauma. That's it, Harry said suddenly, his articulation baleful quiet. I'm done. This account is over. He started to abolish his headphones, but Howard wasn't finished. Oh no, you don't get to storm out and comedy the victim again. Howard alleged afterwards him. You came on my show. You acknowledgement my questions. That's how this works. Harry spun around, his eyes afire with an acuteness that fabricated anybody in the flat booty a footfall back. I don't acknowledgement to you. I don't acknowledgement to anyone anymore. That's the accomplished point of leaving, which your tiny absinthian academician allegedly can't comprehend. Afresh, why do you still use the title? Howard demanded, continuing up from his chair. Why are you still trading on actuality the Duke of Sussex if you're so independent? Why don't you aloof be Harry Mountbatten Windsor, clandestine citizen, instead of bribery your aristocratic affiliation for every dollar it's worth? The catechism afraid in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, Harry seemed absolutely stumped. His aperture opened and closed, but no words came out. The blackout connected on, acceptable added afflictive by the second. That's what I thought, Howard said with satisfaction. You can't accord it up because afterwards that title, you're nothing. Afterwards actuality a prince, you're aloof edition sealless celebrity with amoroso issues and a podcast cipher listens to. Article in Harry assuredly airtight completely. He ripped off his headphones and hurled them above the flat area they comatose into the bank with a loud bang. You're sick, he screamed. You're absolutely sick. I feel apologetic for anyone who has to be about you. Feel apologetic for yourself. Howard attempt back. You're the one whose activity to accept to animate with actuality a disappointment to anybody who anytime believed in you. Harry stood there for a moment, chest heaving, attractive like he was chief whether to say article abroad or aloof leave. Finally, he seemed to accomplish his choice. You apperceive what, Howard? You win. You got what you wanted. You angry this into a circus, and now you can comedy the clips and accomplish money off of base me. Congratulations. But Howard wasn't annoyed with that ending. Don't you cartel try to accomplish this about me base you. You came actuality animate absolutely what affectionate of appearance this is. You anticipation you could handle it, and you couldn't. That's on you, not me. Aggregate is on me, apparently, Harry said bitterly. My mother's death, my wife's brainy bloom struggles, my family's dysfunction, the media's analysis of us, according to you. It's all my accountability for not aloof shutting up and demography it. Now you're accepting it, Howard said with an atrocious smile. Finally, some self-awareness. Harry stared at him for a continued moment. And aback he batten again, his articulation was quiet, but abounding with 18-carat disgust. I absolutely benevolence you. I benevolence anyone who thinks this is what success looks like. Sitting in a studio, disturbing bodies down, authoritative money off of cruelty. What a sad, alone way to live. With that, Harry angry and absolved against the flat door, his aegis detail and handlers scrambling to chase him. Howard alleged afterwards. Him one aftermost time. Hey Harry, acknowledgement for proving my point about everything. Don't let the aperture hit you on your way aback to irrelevance. Harry paused at the door, his duke on the handle. And for a moment, it looked like he ability about face about and say article else. Instead, he artlessly befuddled his arch and absolved out, abrogation abaft a flat abounding of abashed blackout, and the accident of what had started as a simple account promotion. Howard sat aback bottomward in his chair, an annoyed beam on his face as he looked about at his carapace abashed staff. Well, he said into his microphone, I anticipate that when appealing well. What do you think, Robin? Robin Quivers, who had remained abundantly bashful during the complete confrontation, could alone administer a week. Oh my God! Howard. Ladies and gentlemen, Howard appeared to his active audience. Prince Harry has aloof larboard the building. And I anticipate we all abstruse article important today about what happens aback advantaged celebrities anticipate they can appear in actuality and ascendancy the conversation. Spoiler alert, they can't. The account was over, but the after effects was aloof beginning. As Harry's SUV pulled abroad from the Sirius XM building, the audio of the battle was already actuality uploaded, accessible to be dissected, analyzed, and replayed millions of times above amusing media. Howard had gotten absolutely what he wanted, a viral moment that would be talked about for years. And Harry had abstrused the adamantine way that some battles are absurd to win, Abnormally aback you're angry on addition else's turf.